Hare Krishna. My name is Gaur Krishna Das. I'm a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. And I joined Krishna consciousness in London, England. I first went to the temple, Radha London Ishwara Temple, in central London in 1994, June of 1994. I was already over 40 years old at the time. My son, who was 15 at the time, was on Oxford Street, which is the main shopping street of London, or one of the main shopping streets. And he was given an invitation card to the lunch program in the Soho Street Radha London Ishwara Temple. So he gave it to me for some reason. He thought that I would be interested. I was at the time working as an accountant, company secretary for a company in the City of London. Materially speaking, I didn't really have anything to desire. I had a good job, good pay, company car, and yeah, holidays abroad. So materially no problem, but internally I wasn't happy. So it just proves that material things don't really bring happiness. So my son gave me this invitation card to the lunch program at the temple in central London, and actually I couldn't bring myself to go because I was like a suit and tie accountant, middle class English. You know, it was difficult for me to go to the temple. I'd never actually heard really much about Krishna consciousness at the time. But actually I did get introduced to some kind of Indian philosophy because I attended a seminar on Ayurveda by one doctor called Dr. Balaji Tambe, who came to London, and so I attended that for a couple of weekends. And then the people there, they invited me to they had a fortnightly meeting. So I went along there, but it was pretty uninspiring. Their meditation was just listening to some music and looking at some pictures, and that was it, basically, for a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes or something like that. Anyway, I was speaking with one of the organizers, who was a lady, maybe in her 30s or 40s, something like that. And she was telling me about her lifestyle, and she was explaining how she'd been having an affair with a married man on and off for years. So I wasn't very impressed with that. So then, after a while, somehow or other, I got the inspiration or courage to go along to the Radha Krishna temple in central London. And I went on a Saturday, and the lunch program starts with kirtan from 12:30 to 1. Then there's a class, and there was a class given by a senior devotee, a Prabhupada disciple called Raghunath Prabhu, who's a very strong preacher. And the only thing I can remember from that class is that he said that if you want to come to the human platform of life, you have to follow these 4 regulative principles. No eating meat, fish or eggs, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling. And I thought, wow, that's great, because they're not interested in just getting people through the door. Because if they were, then most people in the West anyway, in London, they say, well, what else is there in life? And they run in the opposite direction. So that impressed me, that it was just straight out, you know, if you really want to make progress in life, then you have to follow these regulative principles just to come to the human platform of life. So that encouraged me, and then I stayed for the lunch, because they still do it actually in London. Provided a nice lunch, one devotee was looking after me, and he took me up to the shop, the temple shop, and lots of books there. And I said, well, what should I, if I want to learn more, what should I get? So he said, I think the best thing would be Bhagavad Gita as it is. So I got a Bhagavad Gita as it is and took it home with me and started reading it. And then I went for a Sunday program, and I sat on the floor in the rows of devotees and visitors, and unfortunately I've always been a bit greedy, so the devotees were just serving me and I was just accepting whatever they were offering, and I can guarantee, I'm sure that actually I got intoxicated from eating that prasadam. I didn't know what it was exactly, but when I went home I was so sort of enlivened. I felt that actually my feet never touched the ground. I'm sure they did, but except when I was on the bus. But and when I got home, I was so excited. I said to my family, "I just had the most incredible feast. It was wonderful, marvelous, stupendous." And I was going on, and they looked at me and thought, "Well, he's always been a bit strange, but now he's completely flipped." So I was so disappointed that they didn't, and they weren't interested in coming to the temple themselves. But anyway, I started going for evening Bhagavad Gita classes, and one couple were looking after me, one experienced couple of devotees, book distributors actually, and they were looking after me and helping me. And then one day I was standing at the door of the temple and looking at the altar, and I said, "You're telling me God is a person?" I said, "That's amazing." I'd been going for about 6 months and I hadn't realized, there's God, Krishna, Radha and Krishna on the altar, Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra, Gaur Nitai, and I hadn't clocked on that actually that's God, and that God is a person. So I was amazed. I said, "You're telling me God's a person? That's amazing." So that was my first realization, really. And then I started coming in the mornings for Bhagavatam class before going to work. Anyway, to cut the story short, I was attending programs for a couple of years, and then in 1996, that's just a couple of years later, I started chanting. I got some beads on the first day that I also got the Bhagavad Gita, because the devotee that looked after me, he suggested, you can get these. And I started gradually chanting, because when I read the Bhagavad Gita, I was thinking, he's saying you just have to chant this mantra, Hare Krishna, and practically every page. And I thought, it can't be that simple. But in any case, somehow or other, the philosophy of the Gita rang bells in my mind, and it made sense. So I thought, well, if it makes sense, the philosophy, then maybe I should just try out what the author is saying. So I started chanting, and then in about June or July I started chanting. Then, actual fact, on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day, 14th of November of 1994, I started chanting 16 rounds somehow or other, and have done so ever since. But in 1996, my wife was very against spiritual life, probably especially Krishna consciousness. So anyway, things deteriorated to such an extent that I left home and went to stay in actually the temple president's flat. In fact, I stayed in a room that had been decorated by and stayed in by Keshava Bharati Maharaj. So it was a nice room, so I was very fortunate, so I could stay there. And just after that, a week or so after leaving home, Radhanath Maharaj was in London, and in the airport the devotees explained what had happened and what should I go back, or should I stay where I am in the temple president's apartment. And my son, who was about 16 at the time, he was doing the Bhakta course, or he had just done the Bhakta course, I think, at the manor. So he turned to my son, Radhanath Maharaj, he turned to my son and said, what do you think? You're a devotee, you're a Vaishnava. What do you think? Should your father go back home, or should he stay where he is in the temple? And my son said, I think he should stay in the temple. So he said, okay, fair enough, you do that. So I stayed in the temple, and I was engaged as, because I had training in accounting things, I was engaged as a treasurer for the temple, and the temple was going through some financial crisis, so I was helping with that and trying to bring some order to a chaotic situation. Actually, I was so fried with accounting work that I didn't really want to do it. And I begged on my hands and knees, please don't make me the treasurer. But they did anyway. And in actual fact, that was the best thing, because that's all I could probably do. So I was engaged from, well, actually I did the Bhakti Shastri course in Vrindavan from July to November of 1997. My first trip to India was in in January, February of 1997. Came here actually, and looking back at it, I'm a bit embarrassed because myself and my son, we were very inexperienced devotees, didn't know much, and Maharaj was actually going away for a few days, so he insisted that we stay in his room that he still has here. So we stayed for a few days in his room, which now I would consider probably an offence to do that, but anyway, we didn't know any better, so we stayed there for a few days. And when Maharaj came back, we moved to the ashram, which was just like one room next door at that time in 1997. Then we both flew up to Calcutta and joined Kripa Moya Prabhu's yatra, or pilgrimage, parikram, that he was doing of Mayapur and Vrindavan. No, Puri actually. We went to Mayapur and Puri, which was nice. And then I went back, to London, was appointed treasurer. But then I took 3.5 months out to do the Bhakti Shastri in Vrindavan, the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education. And then I came back in November of 1997, and then between then and 2002 I was a treasurer there. And then I wanted to do some other services. I did some book distribution, not for a long time, but did a few marathons and things, and also some deity worship. I received initiation from Radhanath Maharaj in 1999, the day before Rath Yatra in London, in August, I think it was, July or August of 1999. And then second initiation in 2001. So then I did some deity worship, and then then I moved to Radhadesh for a little while, helping Vishnumurti Prabhu, who has a book distribution, like a shop, which he distributes books to devotees, but that didn't last so long. Then I went to I stayed in India in Mayapur between 2005 and 2008. Most of the time in Mayapur, sometimes going back also to London. In 2008, I decided to go back to England, specifically to our temple in Manchester, which is a small temple in a northern city, Manchester. And because my family lived fairly close to there, so I thought I could cultivate my family. So I spent 3 years there, more or less on my own. Other devotees were coming and going, but nobody permanently there. So after about 3 years of that, I felt that I needed more association, so I moved to Bhaktivedanta Manor in 2011. And I stayed in the ashram there and was doing accounting service actually, for the the UK national office. There's a national office in the UK, so I was helping out, doing accounting work there until last year, actually. And then I retired from that service because I reached the age of nearly 63. And after we started a restaurant in one other city of northern England called Nottingham, but it wasn't successful, so it seemed an appropriate time to make another change. So after that I started greeting guests at Bhaktivedanta Manor, a lot of guests coming, showing them all around and trying to make them feel welcome. And until I came to India at the end of October and went on the Chapati Yatra in Vrindavan, and also attended Satyananda Swami's Govardhan retreat, which was very nice. Then I came down to Udupi for some Ayurvedic treatment, where I've been a couple of times before. And from there went for a week to Govardhan Eco Village, which was very nice, wonderful, inspiring place. And I look forward to seeing how it develops in the future. And then from there came here about 5 days ago, and then we'll be leaving on Sunday to go to Jagannath Puri for a yatra with Vaisheshekha Prabhu, and then on to Mayapur for a yatra there with him, and then the ILS ISKCON Leadership Sangha. I'm not really a leader, but somewhere or other I'm going to that. And then we'll return to London, to Bhaktivedanta Manor in March.